Trey wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere in particular. His mom had simply told him to be home by dinner time, giving him the freedom to explore his neighborhood as he pleased. At 11, he had only recently been allowed to venture to the park alone, a privilege he didn't take lightly. His parents had always been protective, his dad being a firefighter who had seen too many accidents, and his mom a nurse who patched up the results of poor decisions every day at the hospital. "Always keep your eyes open," his father would say, his deep voice serious but kind, not just for your own safety but for others too. "We look out for each other in this community." Trey nodded along whenever his parents gave him these talks, but in truth, he hadn't really understood what it meant to look out for others. Not yet. His world had been small and mostly safe: school, home, basketball practice, and his best friend David's house down the street. He slowed his bike near the playground where younger kids climbed on colorful equipment under the watchful eyes of their parents. Trey was at that in-between age, too old to get excited about slides and swings, but too young to hang out with the teenagers who gathered near the skate park on the far side of the recreation area. Instead, he enjoyed the simple pleasure of riding his bike, feeling the wind against his face and the satisfaction of building up speed on the downhill sections of the path. As he rode, Trey noticed little moments happening around him. An elderly man walking a tiny dog that barked at everything, a group of moms pushing strollers and laughing together, two little kids arguing over whose turn it was on the tire swing, while their dad tried to mediate. This was his neighborhood in all its ordinary glory. He took a swig from his water bottle and wiped his brow. The afternoon heat was picking up, and he decided to head toward the shadier part of the park, where tall oak trees provided relief from the sun. This section was usually quieter, with a few benches scattered along the path and fewer people around. Trey liked it there. It felt peaceful compared to the noisy playground area. His thoughts drifted to the science project due next week. He and David had decided to build a model showing how water erosion shaped landscapes. They had been collecting materials all week, and tomorrow they planned to start construction at David's house. Trey's teacher, Ms. Reynolds, had praised their project idea, saying it showed real understanding of the concepts they'd been studying. The memory of her approval made him smile as he pedaled lazily under the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. The path curved gently ahead, and Trey instinctively slowed as he approached a bend. His dad had taught him to be careful around corners where you couldn't see what was coming. "Better safe than sorry," was another one of his father's favorite sayings. Trey sometimes teased his dad about having so many life rules, but secretly, he appreciated the guidance. It made him feel secure knowing there were reliable ways to navigate the world. As he rounded the bend, Trey noticed a bright yellow backpack lying on the ground just off the path. It seemed out of place, too small for an adult and decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. A child's backpack, abandoned or forgotten. He glanced around but didn't see anyone nearby who might be looking for it. Trey hesitated, then decided to stop. His mom had once lost her purse in the grocery store parking lot, and someone had turned it in with everything still inside. She had been so relieved and grateful, talking for days about the good people still left in this world. Maybe he could be that person for whoever had lost this backpack. He propped his bike against a tree and walked over to pick up the backpack. It was lighter than he expected, as if it might be empty. As he lifted it, a small piece of paper fluttered out and landed on the grass. Trey picked it up and saw it was a child's drawing of a house with a family standing outside. 2 tall figures and 1 small one, all with smiling faces and stick arms extended in what looked like a hug. Written across the top in wobbly letters was, "My family," and a name that appeared to be Lily. "Hey, that's mine," a small voice called out. Trey turned to see a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing a few feet away. She had curly hair pulled into 2 puffs on either side of her head, and was wearing overalls with a bright green t-shirt. Her round face was set in a determined expression as she pointed at the backpack in his hands. "Oh, sorry," Trey said, holding it out to her. "I found it on the ground. I was going to take it to the park office in case someone was looking for it." The girl approached cautiously, keeping some distance between them as she reached for her belongings. "My mom says I shouldn't talk to strangers," she said matter-of-factly, but took the backpack anyway. Trey nodded approvingly. "Your mom's right. That's a good rule." "I'm Lily," the girl said, seemingly deciding Trey wasn't threatening. "I'm 6.5. She held up the appropriate number of fingers to illustrate her point. "Nice to meet you," "Lily, I'm Trey, I'm 11. He didn't feel the need to add and a half to his age anymore. "Is your mom or dad around somewhere?" he asked, looking around the empty path. He didn't feel right leaving such a young child alone in this quieter section of the park. Lily pointed vaguely back the way Trey had come. "Mommy's with my baby brother. He was crying, so she took him to change his diaper. She told me to stay right by the bench, but then I saw a butterfly and followed it. And then I couldn't find my way back." Her bottom lip quivered slightly as the reality of being lost seemed to hit her. Trey felt a rush of sympathy, remembering how scary it had been when he'd gotten separated from his mom at the mall last year. Even at 10, those few minutes of not being able to find her had been terrifying. "Don't worry," he said gently. "We can find your mom together. She's probably really worried about you by now." Lily hugged her backpack to her chest. "Am I in trouble?" she asked in a small voice. "Maybe a little," Trey admitted with a kind smile, "but I think your mom will mostly be happy to see you." He remembered his own mother's reaction when they'd found each other at the mall. A crushing hug followed by teary scolding, then another hug. "Which bench were you sitting at? Do you remember what was around it?" Trey asked, trying to help Lily orient herself. "It had a bird pooping on it," Lily said with the hint of a giggle. "And there was a big trash can next to it. And flowers. Pink ones." Trey thought for a moment. "I think I know where that is. It's near the playground. Do you want to walk back there with me? I can push my bike." Lily nodded, her worry seeming to ease slightly now that there was a plan. As they started walking, Trey kept a respectful distance while still staying close enough to keep an eye on her. His father's words echoed in his mind. "We look out for each other in this community." Today, looking out for others meant helping a lost 6-year-old find her way back to her mother. The walk back toward the playground was filled with Lily's chatter. She told Trey about her baby brother, who was mostly boring but sometimes funny, her favorite dinosaur, Triceratops, and how she had just learned to ride a bike without training wheels. Trey listened and responded with appropriate interest, while keeping an eye out for a worried-looking mom with a baby. They were about halfway back to the main area of the park when they heard someone calling Lily's name, the voice tight with panic and growing louder as it approached. "That's my mommy," Lily exclaimed, her face lighting up. She started running toward the voice. Trey saw a woman hurrying down the path, pushing a stroller with one hand while the other was cupped around her mouth as she called out. When she spotted Lily running toward her, her whole body seemed to sag with relief before she rushed forward to meet her daughter. "Lily, oh my goodness, where did you go? I was so worried." The woman knelt down and wrapped Lily in a tight hug, her eyes closed as she held her daughter close. After a moment, she pulled back to look Lily over as if checking for injuries, then hugged her again. "I followed a butterfly, Mommy, and then I couldn't find you," Lily explained. "But Trey found my backpack and helped me." The woman looked up, noticing Trey for the first time. He stood a few feet away with his bike, giving them space for their reunion. Her face softened with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I only turned away for a minute to change the baby, and when I looked back..." She shook her head, unable to finish the thought. "It's okay," Trey said. "I'm glad I could help." As they all walked back to the main area of the park together, Trey felt a warm sense of satisfaction. Nothing extraordinary had happened. He hadn't saved anyone from a burning building like his dad sometimes did, or helped someone in a medical emergency like his mom. He had simply been in the right place at the right time, paying attention to his surroundings and willing to help. It wasn't heroic, but it mattered. Later that evening, as Trey told his parents about his day over dinner, his father nodded with quiet approval. "You did good, son," he said simply. "That's exactly what I mean about looking out for others." For the first time, Trey truly understood what his parents had been teaching him all along. The world could be a complicated place sometimes, but the important things were actually pretty simple. Pay attention. Be kind. Help when you can. Today, Trey had packed a small lunch in his backpack, a turkey sandwich, an apple, and a juice box that his mom had insisted on, even though he'd told her he wasn't a little kid anymore. He'd rolled his eyes at the time, but was now secretly glad for it, as the midday heat made his throat dry. The park was busier than usual. A community farmers market had set up near the entrance, drawing more families out to enjoy the weekend. Colorful tents dotted the grassy area near the parking lot, and the smell of fresh kettle corn drifted through the air, making Trey's stomach rumble despite his recent lunch. He weaved his bike carefully through clusters of people, ringing his bell occasionally when the path got too crowded. He'd learned from his dad that it was better to move slowly and safely than to rush and risk an accident. Some of the other kids his age would speed through, showing off with wheelies and sharp turns, but Trey preferred to take his time, especially with so many small children darting around unpredictably. As the crowds thinned out, Trey pedaled toward his favorite spot, a small clearing near the woods where an old oak tree provided perfect shade for reading or just watching clouds drift by. His science project with David had gotten an A, and with that pressure off, he was looking forward to starting the mystery novel his teacher had recommended. He was just approaching the bend in the path that led to his spot when he heard voices. One was high-pitched and frightened, clearly a child. The other was lower, a man's voice speaking in what seemed like a forcefully calm tone that didn't match the tension Trey could hear underneath. "It's okay. Your mom sent me to get you. Don't make a scene now." Something about the words made the hairs on Trey's arms stand up. His dad had talked to him many times about stranger danger and the tactics adults might use to trick kids. The "your mom sent me" line was exactly what his father had warned him about. Trey slowed his bike, suddenly alert. The voices were coming from just around the bend, out of sight. He hesitated, his heart beating faster. Should he go see what was happening, or should he go find a grown-up? His parents had always told him to find an adult if something seemed wrong, but what if there wasn't time? Taking a deep breath, Trey decided to at least look. He could always race back for help if needed. He coasted around the bend as quietly as possible, trying not to announce his presence. What he saw made his stomach drop. A man in a baseball cap and sunglasses was gripping the arm of a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She had light brown skin and dark pigtails, and she wore a pink dress with cartoon characters on it. Her face was twisted in fear as she tried to pull away. The man was attempting to lead her toward the woods, away from the main path. The girl wasn't screaming, but her eyes were wide with fear. "I want my mommy," she whimpered, pulling back. "I told you," the man said, his voice tight. "She's waiting for us over here. She had to take your brother to the bathroom. Stop being difficult." Trey froze for a split second, his mind racing. The man wasn't shouting or acting obviously threatening. Someone passing by might think it was just a dad dealing with an uncooperative child. But the girl's fear was unmistakable to Trey. And why would they be heading into the woods? There were no bathrooms there, no picnic areas, nothing but trees and undergrowth. His dad's voice seemed to echo in his head. "Trust your gut, son. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Trey knew he had to do something, but what? He wasn't big or strong enough to confront an adult man. His phone was in his backpack, but even if he called for help, it might come too late. Then he remembered something his teacher had said during a safety assembly at school. "Make noise. Draw attention. Most people who want to hurt others don't want witnesses." Taking a deep breath, Trey pedaled forward, deliberately making his approach obvious. He rang his bike bell several times and called out in the most confident voice he could muster. "Hey there. Is everything okay?" The man's head snapped up, his expression hardening when he saw Trey. "Everything's fine, kid. Mind your own business." The girl looked at Trey with pleading eyes but didn't speak. The man's grip on her arm tightened visibly. Trey's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Actually, I think I know her from school." "What's your name?" he asked the girl directly, ignoring the man. Before she could answer, the man cut in. "I said everything's fine. Her mom asked me to take her home. Now get lost before I tell your parents you're bothering people." The threat might have worked if Trey hadn't noticed how the man was positioned, constantly looking around, nervously and angling his body to block the girl from view of the main path. Everything about the situation felt wrong. Trey made a quick decision. He wasn't leaving this girl, but he needed more help. He positioned his bike so he was between the man and the woods, creating a small barrier. Then he raised his voice even louder. "Hey, does anyone know whose kid this is? She's looking for her mom." The man's face darkened with anger. "Shut up, kid. This is none of your business." His voice had lost its false friendliness, revealing an ugly edge. Trey ignored him and called out again, even louder this time. He noticed a couple on the main path turn their heads, looking toward the commotion. The girl, sensing an opportunity, suddenly yelled, "I don't know him."
"He's not my daddy."
The man's grip on her arm loosened for just a second, as he glanced nervously at the couple who were now definitely paying attention. The girl yanked her arm free and ran toward Trey. Without thinking, he reached out his hand and she grabbed it, positioning herself behind his bike. "Get back here," the man snarled, taking a step forward. "My mommy is at the playground," the girl said, her voice shaking. "I don't know this man." By now, the couple had changed direction and was walking quickly toward them. The man seemed to realize he was losing control of the situation. With a final glare at Trey, he turned and jogged into the woods, disappearing among the trees. "Are you okay?" Trey asked the girl, who was still clutching his hand tightly. She nodded, though her bottom lip trembled. "He said my mommy told him to get me. But my mommy says never go with strangers, even if they say they know her." Her voice was small but determined. "That was really smart of you," Trey said, feeling a rush of relief that she was safe. "And your mom is right. We should go find her now." The couple reached them, concern evident on their faces. "What's going on?" "Is everything all right?" the woman asked. Trey explained quickly what had happened while the man pulled out his phone. "I'm calling park security," he said, already dialing. "My name is Trey," he told the girl gently. "What's yours?" "Zoe," she replied, her grip on his hand loosening slightly now that more adults were present. "I want my mommy." "We're going to take you to her right now," the woman assured her, kneeling down to eye level.
Can you tell us what she looks like or what she's wearing today?
As Zoe described her mother, Trey felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Fear at what might have happened if he hadn't come along, anger at the man who had tried to take her, relief that she was safe now, and underneath it all a strange sense of purpose. He had made a real difference today, maybe the biggest difference possible. Within minutes, a park security officer arrived on a bicycle, and the couple explained the situation again. The officer radioed for police backup and took a description of the man from both Trey and Zoe. Another security officer was dispatched to search the woods, though Trey suspected the man was long gone by now. "Let's get you back to your mom," the first officer said to Zoe. "She must be very worried." He turned to Trey with a serious expression. "You did exactly the right thing, young man." "That was very brave." Trey felt his cheeks warm at the praise. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, though he wondered if that was true. Would everyone have stopped? Or would they have assumed it was a father and daughter having a disagreement and pedaled on by? As they made their way back to the playground area, Trey stayed close to Zoe, pushing his bike with one hand. She seemed calmer now, but kept glancing back as if worried the man might return. "You're safe now," Trey assured her. T. "Here are lots of people around, and we won't leave you until you're with your mom." They had just reached the playground when they heard a woman's frantic voice calling Zoe's name. A tall woman in a yellow sundress was moving quickly from person to person, her face tight with worry. "Mommy," Zoe cried out, breaking into a run. The woman looked up and her expression transformed from fear to overwhelming relief. She rushed forward and swept Zoe into her arms, holding her tightly. "Where were you?" "I've been looking everywhere. I turned around and you were gone." The words tumbled out between kisses to the top of Zoe's head. As the security officer approached to explain what had happened, Trey hung back, suddenly feeling awkward in this intensely personal moment. He watched as the mother's face shifted from relief to horror as she understood how close she had come to losing her daughter. When the explanation was finished, Zoe pointed toward Trey. "He saved me, Mommy. The bad man ran away when he yelled." The woman looked at Trey, her eyes filled with tears and gratitude too deep for words. She reached out one arm, still holding Zoe with the other, and pulled Trey into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for bringing her back to me." In that moment, Trey understood something his father had tried to explain to him once after a difficult day at the fire station. "Sometimes," his dad had said, "the most important thing you'll ever do won't feel heroic in the moment. It'll just feel like the only thing you could possibly do." Trey sat on a plastic chair next to his parents in a small room that the officer had called an interview room. His mom kept her hand on his shoulder, squeezing occasionally as if to reassure herself he was still there. His dad sat straight-backed and serious, asking questions in the calm, measured voice he used when something important was happening. Officer Rivera sat across from them, her notebook open as she went over Trey's statement for the third time. "And you're absolutely sure the man was leading her toward the woods?" she asked. Trey nodded. "Yes, ma'am. They were on the path that goes around the bend, and he was pulling her toward the trees away from the main park area." "And what exactly did he say again?" He told her that her mom had sent him to get her. Then when she kept resisting, he said her mom was waiting in the woods because she had to take her brother to the bathroom. Trey frowned. But there aren't any bathrooms in the woods. And Zoe kept saying she wanted her mom. Officer Rivera nodded, making another note. You showed very good judgment, Trey. Most adults might have assumed it was just a parent dealing with an uncooperative child. But you picked up on the signs that something wasn't right. I just remembered what my dad always says about trusting your gut, Trey said, glancing up at his father. His dad's face remained serious, but his eyes softened with pride. Good listening, he said quietly. Officer Rivera closed her notebook. We've got officers searching the area and checking security cameras from nearby businesses. The description you provided was very helpful. You noticed details many people wouldn't have. The scar on his hand, the logo on his hat. My dad says details matter, Trey explained. He always points out things when we're watching movies or walking around town. Your dad is right, Officer Rivera smiled. Details absolutely matter in police work. She turned more serious. Now, Trey, I know this was a scary experience, but I want you to know that what you did was exactly right. You didn't put yourself in danger by confronting him directly. You stayed in a public place and made noise to draw attention. And most importantly, you trusted your instincts when something felt wrong. Trey's mom squeezed his shoulder again. We're very proud of him, she said, her voice thick with emotion, but also a little shaken up thinking about what could have happened. That's completely understandable. Officer Rivera nodded. Zoe's mother feels the same way. Grateful and terrified all at once. And how is Zoe doing? Trey asked, suddenly remembering the little girl's frightened face. She's doing well, considering. Children are remarkably resilient, Officer Rivera said. She gave us a good statement, too. And her mother is getting her some counseling to help process what happened. They both wanted me to tell you thank you again. Trey felt a warm glow of relief. He'd been worried about Zoe, wondering if she would have nightmares like he sometimes did after watching scary movies. Can I ask a question? Trey's father leaned forward slightly. Of course, Officer Rivera replied. Has there been any pattern of this sort of thing in the area? Should we be concerned about other attempts? The officer's face grew more serious. We've had 2 reports in the last month of a man approaching children in parks across the county, with similar stories about being sent by their parents. Neither of those attempts got as far as this one, thankfully. We're investigating whether they're connected. Trey's mother's hand tightened on his shoulder, and he could feel her tension. His father nodded gravely. We're increasing patrols in parks and near schools, Officer Rivera continued. And we're working with community organizations to refresh safety awareness programs. In fact, she turned her attention back to Trey. The chief was wondering if you might be willing to help with that. Me? Trey asked, surprised. What could I do? Your experience could help other kids understand the importance of being aware of their surroundings and trusting their instincts. Sometimes these messages mean more coming from a peer rather than adults. Trey glanced at his parents. His mother looked concerned, but his father gave a small nod of encouragement. I guess I could try, Trey said hesitantly. You don't have to decide now, Officer Rivera assured him. Talk it over with your parents. If you're comfortable with it, you could speak at school assemblies or help with our Community Safety Day next month. Think about it. As they wrapped up the interview and prepared to leave, the door to the room opened and a tall man in a police uniform with a badge that said, Chief, stepped in. Excuse me, he said. I just wanted to meet the young man I've been hearing about all day. Trey's parents stood up, and Trey followed their lead, suddenly feeling awkward. This is Trey Wilson and his parents. Officer Rivera introduced them. The chief extended his hand first to Trey's parents and then to Trey himself. His handshake was firm but gentle. What you did today took real courage, the chief said, looking directly at Trey. Not just the courage to act, but the courage to notice when something wasn't right in the first place. That's something special. Thank you, sir, Trey mumbled, unsure how to respond to such praise. We'll be keeping in touch about the case, the chief assured them. And if there's ever anything the department can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. As they finally left the police station, the sky had turned a deep orange-pink with the setting sun. Trey felt exhausted, as if he had run a long race. The events of the day seemed almost dreamlike now. Hard to believe they had really happened. His father put an arm around his shoulders as they walked to the car. You okay, son? Trey nodded slowly. Just tired. And thinking a lot. That's normal after something like this, his mom said gently from his other side. Your body's coming down from all that adrenaline. Am I going to be on the news? Trey asked suddenly. The thought had been worrying him since a police officer mentioned that reporters had been calling. His parents exchanged a glance over his head. Only if you want to be, his dad assured him. The police won't release your name without our permission since you're a minor. We can keep you out of the spotlight if that's what you prefer. Relief flooded through Trey. He didn't want cameras and microphones in his face. He didn't want kids at school treating him differently or asking endless questions. I think I'd rather not, he said. Is that okay? More than okay, his mom smiled, ruffling his hair. I'm not keen on having my son's face all over the evening news either. As they drove home, Trey stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of their neighborhood pass by. Everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning, but somehow it all felt different. Or maybe it was him that was different. Dad? He asked after a long silence. Yeah, buddy? How do you do it? I mean, as a firefighter, you see scary stuff all the time. How do you handle it? His father was quiet for a moment, thinking. Well, I focus on the part where I can help, not on the scary part. And I remember that even when things go wrong, trying to help is always better than doing nothing. And we talk about it, his mother added from the driver's seat. That's important too. Keeping scary experiences bottled up inside only makes them scarier. Trey nodded, taking this in. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't been there. Or if I had just ridden past and minded my own business. But you didn't, his father said firmly, and that's what matters. When they got home, their house seemed like a sanctuary, warm and safe. Trey's mom insisted on making his favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, even though it wasn't on their usual me. I'll plan for the week. Special occasions call for special meals, she declared, already pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. As Trey set the table, the house phone rang. His father answered it in the living room, his voice a low murmur. When he returned to the kitchen, his expression was hard to read. That was Mrs. Chen from across the street, he said. Apparently word has spread through the neighborhood grapevine. She says people want to do something to recognize what Trey did today. What kind of something? Trey asked, suddenly wary. She's suggesting a little community gathering. Nothing fancy. Just neighbors coming together to celebrate a bit of good news for a change. Trey looked down at the plates he was arranging. Do I have to make a speech or anything? His dad laughed. No speeches required. Just be yourself. Later that night, as Trey lay in bed, he found his mind racing despite his exhaustion. Images from the day kept flashing through his thoughts. The scared look on Zoe's face. The man's angry expression when Trey interrupted. The tearful gratitude of Zoe's mother. The serious faces of the police officers. His bedroom door creaked open slightly, and his mother peeked in. Still awake? She asked softly. Trey nodded in the dim light from the hallway. She came in and sat on the edge of his bed, just as she used to do when he was younger and had bad dreams. Want to talk about it? I'm not sure, Trey admitted. It's like my brain won't settle down. That's normal, she assured him, smoothing his blanket. Big experiences take time to process, especially ones with big feelings attached. I keep wondering about the man, Trey said, finally voicing what had been bothering him most. What if he tries again with some other kid? What if next time there's no one there to help? His mother sighed. That's a heavy worry to carry, especially for someone your age. But here's what I know for sure. Because of what you did today, the police have a description. Other parents will be more watchful. Children might be more careful. You didn't just help Zoe today. You might have helped other kids you'll never even meet. The thought was both comforting and overwhelming. Trey hadn't been thinking about any of that when he'd decided to speak up. He'd just known he needed to do something. Try to get some sleep, his mom said, bending down to kiss his forehead. Things often look clearer in the morning light. As she reached the door, Trey called out, Mom? She turned. Yes? I think I do want to help. With those safety talks the officer mentioned, if it might help other kids know what to do. His mother smiled, her silhouette framed in the doorway. We can call Officer Rivera tomorrow. I think that's a wonderful idea. After she closed the door, Trey rolled onto his side and felt his racing thoughts finally begin to slow. The world could be a scary place sometimes, he realized. But it was also full of people trying to make it better. Police officers, firefighters like his dad, nurses like his mom, and maybe, in some small way, kids like him who paid attention and spoke up when something wasn't right. Trey hung back near the entrance, overwhelmed by the crowd. His parents stood protectively on either side of him. "We can leave any time you want," his mom whispered, noticing his discomfort. "Just say the word." Before Trey could respond, Mrs. Chen bustled over, beaming with pride as if Trey were her own son. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a floral dress that seemed too fancy for a community center event. "There he is," she exclaimed, clasping her hands together. "Everyone's been waiting to meet you, young man." "I didn't realize it would be such a big deal," Trey said quietly. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "It is a big deal to us, Trey. In times when the news is always full of terrible things, stories like yours remind us that good people are still out there, looking out for each other." She patted his arm. "But don't worry, no speech is required. Just enjoy the food and say hello to people if you feel like it." As Mrs. Chen moved away to greet other arrivals, Trey noticed a familiar face across the room. Officer Rivera stood near the refreshment table, now dressed in regular clothes instead of her uniform. She caught his eye and gave him a small wave. "Can we go say hi?" Trey asked his parents, suddenly feeling a connection to the officer who had been so kind during his interview. They made their way across the room, stopping frequently as neighbors introduced themselves or patted Trey on the shoulder. By the time they reached Officer Rivera, Trey felt like his face might freeze into a permanent smile from all the polite nodding. "Good to see you again," Officer Rivera said warmly. "How are you holding up with all this attention?" Trey shrugged. "It's kind of weird. I didn't do anything special." Officer Rivera exchanged a knowing look with Trey's parents. "That's what all the real heroes say," she replied with a smile. "But I have some news that might make all this fuss more worthwhile. Do you mind if I borrow your son for a minute?" she asked Trey's parents. With their permission, Officer Rivera led Trey to a quieter corner of the room. "I wanted you to know before anyone else," she said, her voice more serious now. "We caught him." Trey's heart jumped. "The man from the park?" She nodded. "The description you gave us was crucial. One of our officers spotted him near a playground in the next town over, watching children. When we brought him in for questioning, we found evidence linking him to 2 other attempted abductions in the county." A mix of feelings washed over Trey: relief, pride, and a lingering unease that such a person had been out there at all. "He won't be able to hurt anyone now," Officer Rivera continued, seeing the emotions play across his face. "And that's because you spoke up." "What'll happen to him?" Trey asked. "He'll face charges and go to trial. The legal system will take over from here." She put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know this is a lot to process, but I thought you deserved to know the impact of what you did." As Officer Rivera walked him back to his parents and explained the news to them, Trey noticed a small commotion at the entrance to the community center. A woman had arrived with a little girl, and people were making way for them to enter. With a jolt, Trey recognized Zoe and her mother. The room seemed to hush slightly as they made their way toward Trey and his family. Zoe looked different today, less frightened, of course, but also somehow smaller in this large room full of adults. She held tightly to her mother's hand, eyes wide as she took in the decorations and crowd. When they reached Trey, her mother spoke first. "We weren't sure if we should come," she admitted. "We didn't want to intrude on your community's celebration." But Zoe insisted she wanted to thank you properly. Trey felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. "You don't have to thank me," he mumbled. "Yes, I do," Zoe said, surprising everyone with her clear, determined voice. She let go of her mother's hand and stepped forward. From behind her back, she produced a folded piece of paper and held it out to Trey. "I made this for you." Trey carefully unfolded the paper to reveal a crayon drawing. In the childish but heartfelt style of a 6-year-old, Zoe had drawn 2 figures, one tall with brown skin wearing a blue shirt, clearly meant to be Trey, and one small with pigtails and a pink dress, obviously Zoe. Between them was a red heart, and above it all in wobbly letters, "Thank you for saving me." Trey stared at the drawing, unexpectedly moved by the simple, honest gratitude it represented. "Do you like it?" Zoe asked anxiously when he didn't speak right away. "I love it," Trey said, finding his voice. "It's the best thank you card I've ever gotten." Zoe beamed, then became serious again. "My mom says you were brave." Trey glanced at his father, remembering their conversation about bravery. "I was scared, actually," he admitted. But sometimes you have to do things even when you're scared. Zoe nodded solemnly as if absorbing an important life lesson. Her mother stepped forward then, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't have words big enough to thank you for what you did," she said quietly. "But I want you to know that Zoe and I will pay it forward. We're already signed up for a safety awareness program at her school." After Zoe and her mother moved on to get some refreshments, the gathering continued with a more festive atmosphere. The tension that had been present at the start seemed to have dissipated with the good news from Officer Rivera, and the touching moment with Zoe. Trey found himself more able to relax and even enjoy the attention a little. The local baker had made cookies in the shape of shields with "Hero" written on them in blue icing. His friends from school had shown up and were treating him with a mixture of awe and their usual teasing, which felt reassuringly normal. As evening approached and the crowd began to thin, the mayor of their small town arrived. He was a tall man with a friendly face who insisted on shaking Trey's hand for what felt like 5 straight minutes. "Young man," the mayor said, "I'd like to present you with a citizen's commendation at next week's town council meeting. If you're willing." Trey looked questioningly at his parents. "It's up to you," his father said. No pressure either way. Trey thought about it. He still didn't feel comfortable with all the attention, but he was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about him. His story had brought the community together and opened up important conversations about child safety. "Okay," he agreed finally, "but could I use the opportunity to talk about the safety program Officer Rivera mentioned? I think that's more important than me getting an award." The mayor looked surprised, then impressed. "Absolutely. In fact, that's an excellent idea. We could launch the program officially at the same meeting." By the time they headed home, darkness had fallen and Trey was exhausted. But it was a good kind of tired, like after a baseball game or a long bike ride. As they drove through their neighborhood, his father broke the comfortable silence. "Proud of you, son. Not just for what you did at the park, but for how you're handling all this attention." "Thanks, Dad." Trey stared out the window at the familiar houses passing by, thinking about how different things seemed now than just a few days ago. "Do you think things will ever go back to normal?" His mother glanced back at him from the front seat. "They will, but it might be a new kind of normal. Experiences like this change us a little bit. Is that good or bad?" Trey wondered aloud. "Could be both," his father replied thoughtfully. "But mostly good, I think. You've seen what you're capable of now. That kind of confidence sticks with you." When they arrived home, Trey went straight to his room and carefully pinned Zoe's drawing to his bulletin board. Next to his basketball schedule and science project award, it looked out of place. A bright splash of crayon among more grown-up things. But somehow it felt like the most important thing on the board. Later that night, as Trey was getting ready for bed, he heard his parents talking in low voices in the kitchen. Curious, he crept down the hallway and paused just out of sight. "Did you see his face when that little girl gave him the drawing?" his mother was saying. "I nearly lost it right there." "He's handling all this better than I would have at his age," his father replied, his voice filled with a pride that made Trey stand a little straighter in the darkness of the hallway. "Officer Rivera called me aside, you know," his mother continued. "She said they're thinking of developing a whole safety curriculum based on what Trey did, teaching kids to trust their instincts and how to get help safely. So his actions might end up protecting countless other kids," his father said. "That's something special. It's like ripples in a pond," his mother mused. One good action spreading outward, affecting more and more people. Trey silently made his way back to his room, mulling over what he'd heard. The idea that what he'd done could help other kids he'd never even meet, gave him a warm feeling inside. It was bigger than just him and Zoe now. As he climbed into bed, Trey looked again at the drawing on his bulletin board, visible in the dim glow of his nightlight. One simple decision to stop and check if something was wrong had created all these ripples. His teachers were always talking about how ordinary people could make a difference in the world, but until now those had just been words. Now he understood. Not because he'd done something extraordinary, but because he'd done something necessary when it needed to be done. And maybe that was what being brave really meant. The town council meeting where Trey received his citizen's commendation had indeed become the launch of a new community safety program. Trust Your Instincts posters now hung in school hallways and community buildings throughout the county. Trey's story, with his name changed to protect his privacy, had become part of the safety curriculum taught in local elementary schools. Today was the first big test of all that work. Trey stood backstage at the middle school auditorium, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the room filling with students from his school and the neighboring elementary school. Nervous? Officer Rivera asked, appearing beside him in her full uniform. Trey nodded. A little. It's weird to talk in front of so many people. Just speak from the heart, she advised. Tell them what happened and what you learned. That's all you need to do. The school principal stepped up to the microphone on stage and welcomed everyone to the first Community Heroes Assembly. As she explained the new safety initiative, Trey took deep breaths just like his basketball coach had taught him to do before big games. And now, the principal said, I'd like to introduce Officer Rivera from our local police department, along with a student who has an important story to share. That was their cue. Officer Rivera gave Trey an encouraging nod, and they walked onto the stage together. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience clearly, which was actually a relief. Trey could pretend he was just talking to a few people instead of hundreds. Officer Rivera spoke first, explaining the importance of personal safety and community awareness. Then she turned to Trey. This young man has first-hand experience with how trusting your instincts and taking appropriate action can make a real difference. I'll let him tell you about it. Trey stepped up to the microphone, suddenly aware of how quiet the room had become. He cleared his throat. My name is Trey, he began, his voice steadier than he expected. 3 months ago, I was riding my bike in the park when I noticed something that didn't seem right. As he told his story, leaving out certain details for privacy and keeping his explanation age-appropriate for the younger students, Trey noticed the room growing even quieter. Every face was turned toward him, listening intently. Even the teachers who had been keeping an eye on fidgety kids were now fully focused on his words. The most important thing I learned, Trey concluded, was that you don't have to be a superhero to help someone. You just have to pay attention and trust that feeling in your gut when something seems wrong. And you have to be willing to do something about it, even if it's scary. When he finished speaking, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. Trey felt his cheeks warm as he stepped back from the microphone. Officer Rivera took over again, explaining the specific safety strategies that kids could use in different situations. As they wrapped up the assembly, the principal announced that students could submit questions for Officer Rivera and Trey to answer. A teacher walked around with a microphone, allowing selected students to ask their questions directly. A small boy with glasses too big for his face asked, "Weren't you afraid the bad man would hurt you too?" "Yes, I was definitely afraid," Trey admitted. "But I was careful to stay in a public place and make noise to get other people's attention, rather than confronting him directly. That's really important. Being brave doesn't mean being reckless." A girl about Trey's age raised her hand next. "Do you still think about what happened? Like, does it give you nightmares or anything?" The question caught Trey off guard with its directness. He considered how to answer honestly without scaring the younger kids. "I thought about it a lot at first," he said carefully. "I had some trouble sleeping for a while. But talking about it with my parents and knowing that Zoe, the girl who was in danger, was safe really helped. And seeing how our community came together to make sure this kind of thing is less likely to happen again, that's turned something scary into something positive." The last question came from a tiny girl in the front row who looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, around Zoe's age. "Are you and the girl you helped friends now?" she asked in a small voice that barely carried through the microphone. Trey smiled. "Yes, we are. Her family moved to our neighborhood last month. And sometimes I ride my bike alongside her while she practices riding without training wheels." What he didn't mention was how that connection had become one of the most meaningful parts of the whole experience. Zoe's family had wanted to stay in touch, and over the summer, they'd been invited to barbecues and pool days together. Watching Zoe transform from the frightened child in the park to a laughing, confident girl zooming down her driveway on her new bike had been a kind of healing for Trey too. After the assembly ended and the students filed out of the auditorium, Trey's parents were waiting in the hallway. His mom pulled him into a hug. "You did great up there," she said, clear, confident, and compassionate. His dad gave him a solid pat on the shoulder. "Couldn't have said it better myself, buddy." Officer Rivera joined them, holding a folder. "I have something to show you all," she said with a smile. Remember how we talked about turning this experience into something positive that could help other kids? She opened the folder to reveal colorful brochures with "Trust Your Eye" instincts printed across the top. Inside was a cartoon-style comic that told a story very similar to what had happened with Trey and Zoe, though with different names and simplified details. These will be distributed to schools across the state next month, Officer Rivera explained. The program is being adopted as a model for child safety education, and it all started because of what you did, Trey. Trey stared at the brochure, struggling to process how his one decision on an ordinary Saturday had led to something so much bigger than himself. "This feels huge," he said finally. "It is huge," his father agreed. "But it's also simple. One person noticed something wrong and decided to help. That's how most big changes start, with one person doing one right thing." As they walked to the car, Trey's principal stopped them in the parking lot. "I just wanted to say thank you again for speaking today," she said. "And I thought you'd like to know that after the assembly, 3 different students came to my office wanting to report concerning situations they'd observed but hadn't known how to handle. Your story gave them permission to speak up." On the drive home, Trey was unusually quiet, processing everything that had happened. "Penny, for your thoughts?" his mom asked from the front seat. "I was just thinking about how different things are now compared to before," Trey said. "Remember how I used to just ride around the park minding my own business? Now I notice everything. Like yesterday when I saw that little kid wandering near the street and helped him find his dad. That's called growth," his father said. "Experiences change us, but it's not just me that's different," Trey continued. "It's like everything connected to what happened has changed too." Zoe's family moved here. The police made a whole program. Kids at school look at me differently. Ripple effects, his mother nodded. One action touches many lives. When they got home, Trey went to his room and took out the journal his counselor had suggested he keep. After the incident, his parents had arranged for him to talk with someone about what had happened. Not because they thought he was traumatized, but because they believed processing big experiences was important. The counselor, a kind woman with gray-streaked hair and colorful glasses, had given him the journal during their 3rd session. "Sometimes writing things down helps us see patterns and meaning we might miss otherwise," she'd explained. Trey hadn't been very consistent with the journal at first, but today felt important enough to record. He opened to a fresh page and began to write. "Today I spoke at the assembly about what happened at the park. It was scary but good. Officer Rivera showed us the safety brochures they're sending to schools all over the state. It's weird to think that kids I'll never meet might be safer because of what happened. Mrs. Klein, my principal, said 3 kids came forward after the assembly to report things that worried them. I hope they're okay and get the help they need. Zoe is doing really well. She waved to me from the front row during the assembly. Her mom says she doesn't have nightmares anymore, and she's made lots of friends at her new school. I'm teaching her how to do wheelies on her bike. Don't tell her, Mom. Sometimes I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't been there that day, or if I had just ridden past. But Dad says that kind of thinking isn't helpful. What matters is what did happen and what we do next. What I learned. Being brave isn't about not feeling scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. And sometimes one small right thing can lead to a bunch of bigger right things." Trey closed the journal and placed it back in his desk drawer. From downstairs, he could hear his mother calling him for dinner. The familiar sounds and smells of home wrapped around him like a warm blanket. His dad's laugh, the sizzle of something cooking, the faint music from the kitchen radio. Life had returned to normal in many ways. But it was a new normal, one where Trey understood something important about himself and the world around him. He had discovered a simple but powerful truth. Ordinary people, even kids like him, could make a real difference when they paid attention and cared enough to act. As he headed downstairs to join his family, Trey felt a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Whatever challenges came next, he would face them with the same courage and compassion that had guided him on that day in the park, not because he was special or heroic, but because